So, hello everyone. Welcome to the Disability Visibility at USF podcast interview series. I'm your host, Liz Keysat, Director of the USF Humanities Institute. This semester, we are interviewing faculty, staff, and students who are involved in disability studies, research, advocacy, and who want to share their story on this platform as a follow-up from our event with Alice Wong. Today, I am joined by Kasey Nichols. Welcome, Kasey.
Hi.
Hi, maybe you could just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and why you wanted to join this podcast series.
Okay, so I am majoring in psychology currently. I'm on my senior year. My disability is called retinopathy of prematurity, or ROP. Um, and I guess so I have a visual impairment. And I guess the reason why I wanted to join was to be a part of the podcast was just to tell my story and to talk about how inspired I am by Alice Wong's work, particularly the Disability Visibility book, and reading that really helped to
Had you
guide
heard
me to where I am today.
had you heard of Alice Wong before the event?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I had. I actually listened to a couple of podcasts, and I had heard her on a podcast called Just Between Us prior to this. And then I went ahead and read her work, her Disability Visibility book.
Mhm.
And once I read that, it really resonated with me, and it helped me to find out what I wanted to do, which is do disability advocacy work.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So tell me a little bit about your story um, with your vision and the challenges that you've had or what you've learned from dealing with that.
Yeah. A little bit about myself. I, at one point in my life, I wasn't as vocal about my disability as I am now. That took a lot of growing, I think, for me. In the beginning, I've always been disabled, so I've never known a life outside of that. And it took me going into my adulthood and realizing, oh, I don't have to use person first language. I can use identity first language, and I I pride myself on having this disability because it helps to showcase like how I view the world and how I connect with other people. And it's given me a lot more empathy, I think. Um, where I'm at now is kind of like I'm in this space where I take my disability and it's my identity. It's part of who I am as a person. And It's really informed a lot of like the way that I go about politics and just my day-to-day life, really.
So is your research at USF or your chosen degree program is that linked with your advocacy work, or do you see them as two sort of different things?
I see them as linked actually. So before I got into more about my disability and learning about other disabled people as a whole and our community, psychology was the gateway to that.
Mhm.
So learning about mental illness and learning about the ways in which mental illness is a disability and what that's like, whether or not people choose to call it that or not.
Mhm.
It's how the world kind of perceives you, even if you don't necessarily identify with the word disabled. Having mental illnesses can be a way to kind of understand um, disability and disability culture. And finding that, I think, is what helps me to further define the way that I view disability as just a word in general, and a label and an identity, I think. Yeah, I think psychology is very crucial to disability advocacy work.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So,
Yeah.
what are some things that you would like to see changed? either locally at USF or nationally, or what would be some of your sort of target things you'd like to see differently?
Yeah, some things I would like changed, I think, is like in universities in general. I've noticed that while there is a lot of care put forth in these programs that we have, right? Um, uh, SAS,
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature, stuff like that. I feel that it's important to remember that the people that we need to be listening to first is disabled people. So, having a consultant to tell another disabled person, a consultant there to go and work with SAS, saying, hey, I noticed this here. Well, I'm disabled, so this is my experience, and here's the ways that I can help you. So, you know, directing that planning to other disabled students, reaching out to them more, and providing, personable feedback, um, and letting the student body, like the disabled students, have more of a say of what's going on with SAS. um, Adding people for sensitivity training, I think that needs to happen. you know um, Sensitivity training with the instructors and with the overall staff, I think, is something very crucial, to listening to disabled people, because I find that oftentimes that, while it is run by people that have a lot of knowledge and choose to study, it's oftentimes able-bodied people. So there's a disconnect there. I would also love to see like more openness to identity first language,
Mm-hmm.
most importantly, instead of person first language, because I feel that that would be something to help. So having a consultant for each disability group, like if so visually impaired, and there's deaf hard of hearing community, and there's um, you know people that are neurodivergent. So having someone, a consultant for each group, which is obviously easier said than done. There would have to be like a way to come up with the economic, finances and budgets for that sort of thing. But it's something that I think is crucial to moving the goalpost forward with SAS, and just in general, with disability services. Like, so finding ways in which we can create community of disabled people and help them run the, what's been given to them, which is their accommodations. So
Yeah,
really listening and honing into other disabled people.
that's an amazing point.
Mm-hmm.
It was it was really interesting to me. The idea, the importance of community was something that Alice
Mm-hmm.
came back to sort of over and over again. And but this is the first time I've heard somebody suggest this idea of an identity first, you know,
Mm-hmm.
sort of take to things. And for
Mm-hmm.
our listeners who don't know, SAS is Student Accessibility Services. So that's our on-campus group that assists with that assists the student community. And I think Alice talked about thinking of making accommodations as we tend to look at it as a cost benefit sort of
Mm-hmm.
analysis. And of course, there are financial realities, but she touched on this idea of, think about all the success that your students would have, the increase in student retention, and then of course that means more tuition dollars, and so that by helping students be successful at every level, that's an investment that the university,
Yes.
can be making in
Mm-hmm.
the success of all of their students.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely, and going on what Alice was talking about, and a lot she focuses a lot in the book too, is visibility. So making SAS, student accessibility services, visible, making it a place where, re- regardless of if you choose to identify as disabled or not, having that space and making it visible for students to come, because oftentimes I've heard from other, like my peers, that, you know, they didn't know student accessibility services was even there. And then, like, so having that community, I think, is what's going to be important, to pass it on word of mouth. Like, these are your accommodations. This is your right. You know, even going back to the ADA. So, you know, the accessibility, the, you know, Disabilities Act, American Disabilities Act, you know, that was only here for such a short time. It's only now been established in the 90s. And so, you know, my generation going forward obviously is aware of that. But just making people more aware of the resources and
Yeah.
different ways, and maybe looking towards having a community of disabled students,
Mhm.
that help to facilitate conversations about disability and what can be done and what's needed. I think that's definitely important.
No, I think that's a wonderful point. We're going to have, I'm actually doing an interview with one of the directors at SAS. But something she mentioned to me that I thought was interesting was I think right now that office is serving about 2,400 students,
Mm-hmm.
which in light of the student population at USF seems like an incredibly small number. I mean, 2,400 students is a lot of students to serve, but in a campus of this size, that's such a minuscule percentage. I was like, ooh, we must not
Yes.
be reaching the students we need to reach.
And I don't think so. Like, and I feel that, you know, like, when I'm talking to people one on one, a lot of people are disabled, but they aren't disclosing,
Mhm.
and that's because I think the stigma that comes along with that. But it also has to do with, you know, I think the I think universities in general, they're missing this core component of a lot of their students are disabled. A lot of their students. So how can we make every day to day more accessible, rather than just opposed to just you only reach out to this core source and that's it, and you get your accommodations met? How can we meet the general needs of all of these people, even the people that aren't disclosing? And I think what's important too is, like, if I don't think, as able-bodied people, I don't think there's a realization that it takes a lot to ask for your accommodations and for your accommodations to get met, because there's a lot of, you need documentation here, there, and that's very important. Documentation is important. But what I think there needs to be is, there needs to be an honest conversation about how how difficult it is to provide all of these documentations, to then have professors tell you, well, I'm not sure, if you don't give this documentation right away, then you can't get your accommodations met.
Right.
So I think there needs to be a conversation about how difficult it is for disabled people to disclose and then have to go and tell you, I need this, and this done. It takes a lot of planning, and there should be more planning on the instructor's part and on the overall institution's part, because it takes a lot, especially emotionally as well.
Yeah, I was going to say it seems like there's both practical and emotional hoop jumping, um,
Mhm.
that and it seems like there's also, an inherent expense involved sometimes in, getting documents or, getting testing conducted or something like that. So I feel like there's even, an extra economic burden um,
Yes.
on students that they may or may not be able to meet.
There definitely is. And, like, say a student can't go in and go and pay for this doctor's visit, to go get this done, but they know that they're sick,
Right.
and to have a, and this has happened to me, and to have instructors say, well, I'm sorry, but this is the deadline, this is it. So there needs to be some kind of accommodating where the professors and the students can meet in the middle a little bit more. And I think there really needs to be more of a dialogue with other disabled students, and higher ups,
Yeah.
to how to make it more accessible. um, you know I think that's important. um, And then, so this time last year, actually, an email was sent out to visually impaired students only.
Okay.
And it was saying how there were going to be budget cuts and things like that happening. So basically, the access assistance that we had been getting, that some students get, if their accommodations meet that, and if they have the right documentation, they can have that. So they were trying to cut that and say, well, okay, we're going to have only peers doing note taking, and there was no discussion of back and forth or incentive for that. So
Oh,
then once I ended up, um, you know, going and deciding, okay, I'm going to create a petition because I don't know, this email was very scary. And so once I did that and talked to the Oracle and had a newspaper published and stuff, we ended up getting it figured out to where they found out that there was a way to, make sure that the cost needs were met, and for the students to still get their accessibility needs met with these access assistants, and they're still here today. But those kinds of dialogues, really need to be reaching out to the student body first to say, how do you feel about this,
yeah.
rather than a set decision, I think.
No,
You know.
so you were just sort of notified that, hey, this is the decision we've made.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, good for you for pushing back on that. And I think, that's probably, I mean, that's not a burden that you should have had to have shouldered, but, you did not only for yourself, but for everyone else who needed, to be included in that discussion. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, wow, that's amazing. Um, so I don't want to keep you too long. I know we said we try and keep these about, 15 or so minutes. Is there anything else that you definitely want to make sure that we sort of touch on or cover at this point?
Um, I just want to say that the while the onus is on disabled people to advocate for themselves and strive for independence, the onus is also on able-bodied people to provide a space where they can feel like they are going to get their needs met and be independent. So independence is important, but I think accessibility is just as important. So providing a space um, for disabled people to feel like that their needs are met is crucial.
That's
And
that's
that's
great.
pretty much it.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Mhm,
think Alice talked about independence and interdependence, and
mhm.
I thought interdependence was such a lovely sort of counterbalance to this idea of everybody's sort of in it for themselves, and it's like we're actually a community,
Yeah.
um, that needs to be supporting each other. So
Yes.
thank you so much, Kasey, for joining us for the first in our series of podcast interviews talking about disability visibility at USF. And we invite you to join us next time. Thank you.